Imagine sitting at a family brunch, staring down at a cup of coffee your husband made, coffee that smells off, metallic, wrong. And in that moment, you realize the people closest to you may be plotting your downfall. That was the day I finally uncovered the truth about my husband and his sister and the trap they had been setting for me all along. "Don't you want to try the coffee I made for you, sweetheart?" His voice was soft, almost casual, but the smile on his lips didn't reach his eyes. I was sitting at my sister-in-law Melissa's oak dining table in her pristine Charleston home, the kind of house that always smelled faintly of fresh linen and citrus polish. It was supposed to be our monthly Sunday brunch, a family tradition that Melissa insisted on. The table was perfectly set. Quiche, scones, berries laid out like a magazine spread. But all I could focus on was the steaming mug of coffee in front of me. My husband, Daniel, had placed it there with exaggerated care, like he was offering me a gift. I leaned in, and that's when I smelled it. Not the warm, rich aroma of roasted beans, not the vanilla creamer I usually liked. This smelled metallic, almost bitter, like pennies left in the rain. My stomach turned. Melissa sat across from me, stirring her own untouched coffee with slow, deliberate movements. "Daniel's become quite the barista lately," she said, her lips curling into a smirk. "He's been practicing new brews, just for you." The way she emphasized those last three words, "just for you," sent chills up my spine. I forced a smile, lifting the cup as though preparing to take a sip. Inside, my thoughts were racing. For 3 years, I'd been brushing off strange incidents. The accidental food poisoning after Melissa made me tea, the urgent care visits when something I ate at her house didn't sit right. The way Daniel always had excuses ready. "Maybe you caught a stomach bug. Maybe it was something you ate earlier. Don't be dramatic." But deep down, a whisper had started to form. "This isn't an accident. This is a pattern." I watched them closely. Melissa's eyes glittered, fixed on me, while Daniel pretended to scroll through his phone. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe the thought that terrified me most. They want me gone. I shifted in my chair, putting on my best clumsy act. "Oh, sorry, I just need to take this call real quick," I said, fumbling my phone and bumping the table. In the shuffle, I switched our cups, my untouched mug for Melissa's. "Oops," I laughed, pretending to be embarrassed. "I'm such a klutz." Melissa waved it off with a tight smile. "Just try not to break anything." I slipped into her study, my heart pounding. From the doorway, I watched. Melissa lifted the cup, took a sip, and my stomach clenched. A part of me wanted to scream, to snatch it away. But another part of me needed to know. I had spent too many nights doubled over in pain, too many hours humiliated in hospital gowns, always chalked up as bad luck. I needed proof. And then it happened. Her hand trembled. She set the cup down, her face suddenly pale. "Daniel," she whispered. "Something's wrong." Daniel's head snapped up. He saw which cup she'd grabbed. His expression twisted from confusion to horror. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup," he blurted, his voice sharp with panic. My blood went cold. Melissa tried to stand but stumbled, clutching the edge of the table. "James, what did you put in that coffee?" I stepped out from the study, phone in hand, recording every word. Daniel dropped to her side, pale and frantic. "It wasn't supposed to. You weren't supposed to." Melissa's voice was strangled with pain, but sharp with rage. "You said it would just make her sick. Sick enough to miss the client presentation next week. You swore it couldn't be traced." Her words cut through me like a blade. The client presentation, the one I'd been preparing for months. The same account Melissa had been trying and failing to land at her firm. The tea, the breakfasts, the unexplained hospital visits. It all snapped into focus. I kept my phone steady, the recording rolling. My hands were trembling, but my voice was calm when I said, So it was never an accident, never a contract with my family. They said, stay. Melissa's eyes, filled with pain, met mine. For once, the smugness was gone. You switched the cups. She gasped. You knew? Yes, I said softly. I knew. Melissa's face was the color of parchment, sweat beading on her forehead as she slumped back in her chair. Daniel scrambled beside her, fumbling with napkins, water, anything to look useful. But I wasn't fooled. His hands shook too violently, his eyes darted too often, not with concern, but with fear. Call 911! Melissa croaked, her voice raw. Daniel's hand hovered over his phone, frozen, like a child caught with matches. I lifted mine slowly, the recording still running, the little red light blinking at the corner of the screen. Already done, I lied smoothly. Help is on the way. Melissa's gaze flicked to me, pupils wide, breathing shallow. For the first time in years of knowing her, I saw something other than disdain in her expression. It wasn't pity or superiority. It was raw panic. Daniel glanced up, his face pale and twisted. Anna, you don't understand. Don't I? I cut in, my voice sharper than I expected. I've been doubled over in bathrooms for years after meals at this house. I've watched you both smirk while I apologize for ruining dinners, for being sensitive. And now I hear it out of your own mouths. You were trying to make me sick enough to ruin my work. You thought you'd get away with it. Melissa tried to sit up straighter, wincing. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It's not poison. It's just enough to... Her sentence dissolved into a pained groan. I stepped closer, keeping my phone steady. My voice dropped to a near whisper, deadly calm. Just enough to what? Humiliate me? Destroy my career? Drive me insane? Which one was it? Daniel reached out as if to grab my hand, his voice trembling. Anna, please, stop recording. We can fix this. That single word, fix, ignited something in me. I thought about every night I curled up on the cold bathroom floor, every doctor who dismissed me with vague diagnoses, every time Daniel told me I was overreacting while Melissa smirked into her wine glass. I thought about the hours of work stolen by my weakness, the whispers in the office that maybe I wasn't cut out for the big accounts, maybe I was too fragile. And I thought about the childlike terror in Melissa's eyes when she realized the game was up. Fix this? I repeated, my voice low, shaking. No, Daniel, you don't get to fix this. You did this. Melissa let out a low moan, curling slightly toward the table. Water, she gasped. I slid the untouched pitcher across the table, my hand trembling just enough for the glass to clink. Here, drink. Maybe it'll help. I didn't move to pour it for her. I wasn't her caretaker anymore. The paramedics arrived 10 minutes later, sirens cutting through the humid Charleston air. Daniel sprang to his feet, suddenly eager to look like the doting husband and brother. But when they asked what happened, Melissa broke first. Melissa pointed a trembling hand at me. She switched the cups. The lead paramedic, a stern woman with cropped hair, narrowed her eyes. Switched. Willis's voice cracked. The coffee. Daniel made coffee. It wasn't supposed to be mine. It was hers. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. The paramedic's gaze swung to Daniel. What was in it? His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. No, nothing dangerous. Just a mild sedative. A sedative? The paramedic's eyebrows shot up. Why the hell would you put that in her coffee? His gaze flicked to me, then to the recording phone, still clutched in my hand, the red light blinking like a silent witness. His shoulders sagged. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he muttered, almost to himself. The paramedics exchanged glances before lifting Melissa onto a stretcher. "We'll need to test her blood immediately," one of them said, already calling ahead to the ER. When they wheeled her out, Daniel turned to me, desperation etched in every line of his face. "Anna, listen to me. I didn't want to hurt you. She pushed me. She said it was the only way to make sure you'd fail at the presentation. I just went along because what?" I snapped, tears burning my eyes. "Because you're weak? Because you wanted her approval? Or because you were hoping I'd fail too?" He flinched, and in that moment, the last shred of love I had for him evaporated. I shook my head slowly. "You chose her side, Daniel, not mine, and now you're both going to pay for it." The days that followed blurred into a haze of police interviews, hospital visits, and endless whispers. The Charleston gossip mill spun into overdrive. Neighbors eyed me curiously at the grocery store, their smiles tight, questions hanging unsaid. Melissa was released after 48 hours of observation. The toxicology report confirmed trace amounts of benzodiazepines, nothing lethal but enough to incapacitate, enough to humiliate, enough to ruin. And Daniel? He moved into a hotel temporarily, though we both knew he wasn't coming back. At night, alone in my bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly overhead. My body remembered the fear, the sickness, the humiliation. But underneath that, something else grew. Resolve. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. One evening, Lena, my closest friend from work, came over with takeout and cheap wine. We sat cross-legged on my couch, cartons of lo mein between us. "You need to press charges," she said flatly. "This isn't just betrayal. This is criminal." I swirled my wine, watching the deep red cling to the glass. "The police said it'll be tough to prove intent. Melissa's already spinning it as an accident. Daniel claims he was manipulated. They're trying to make me sound paranoid." Lena's eyes blazed. "Paranoid? Anna, you have a recording. You have a toxicology report. You've been in urgent care half a dozen times after eating at her house. How much more do you need?" Her words struck something deep inside me. For years, I had doubted myself, convinced by Daniel's calm gaslighting that I was overreacting. But now, with Lena's fire beside me, I felt that doubt shifting into something sharper. "You're right," I said, setting my glass down with a firm plink. "I've been playing defense. It's time to go on offense." The very next morning, I pulled out every medical record I had from the past 3 years, every ER visit, every doctor's note. I spread them across my dining table like puzzle pieces, highlighting the dates that aligned perfectly with Melissa's brunches and dinners. I added the recording, screenshots of Daniel's texts urging me to be polite to his sister, to stop being dramatic when I felt sick. Notes from colleagues who had covered for me at work when I left suddenly ill. The pattern was undeniable, and this time I wasn't going to let anyone call me paranoid. By the end of the week, I had a binder thick with evidence, a weapon, and I wasn't afraid to use it. But the pressure didn't stop. Melissa called one evening, her voice still hoarse but her tone sharp. "You don't understand, Anna," she hissed. "This was never supposed to go that far. I just needed you out of the way for that presentation. It was business, nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" My laugh was bitter, hollow. "You tried to drug me, Melissa. You and your brother sat there watching me suffer for years. And now you want me to believe it wasn't personal?" Her silence was telling. Finally, she spat. "You'll ruin the family if you keep pushing this." "No," I said softly, gripping the phone tighter. "You ruined the family the moment you put that cup in front of me." And I hung up. By now, whispers had reached the office too. A colleague pulled me aside after a meeting. "Is it true?" she whispered. "About Daniel and Melissa? About the coffee?" I met her gaze squarely. It's true. Her eyes widened, and in that moment I realized something important. I wasn't the only one they underestimated. They thought gossip would shame me into silence, but the truth was louder than any whisper. The Charleston summer hung heavy in the air, thick with humidity and the smell of magnolia blooms. Every time I stepped outside, sweat prickled at my temples and dampened my blouse. But inside, my mind was colder than it had ever been. I had stopped trembling. I had stopped second-guessing. For the first time in years, I was steady. And with that steadiness came clarity. If I wanted justice, I couldn't wait for the system to hand it to me. I had to build it myself. I started with the binder. Each night after work, I added more. A timeline of every suspicious incident. Notes from coworkers who remembered me leaving abruptly. Receipts from ER visits. Screenshots of texts. The binder grew thicker, heavier, almost like a living thing. I kept it on my dining table, open, like a warning. A reminder that I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't crazy. The recording was my centerpiece. Sometimes I'd play it late at night, letting Melissa's hoarse voice fill the room again. You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the presentation. And Daniel's panicked reply, that wasn't supposed to be your cup. Every time I heard it, my stomach clenched, but it also sharpened my resolve. It was my sword, my shield. The undeniable truth they couldn't gaslight away. Of course, Daniel tried. He called me one evening, his voice soft, almost rehearsed. Anna, he began, I've been thinking about everything. I made a mistake, a terrible one. But you have to believe me, I didn't want to hurt you. Melissa pressured me. She said you were in the way. I just wanted to keep the peace. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, my pulse quickening. Keep the peace? I repeated, my voice icy. Daniel, you put drugs in my coffee. You stood by while your sister tried to destroy me. You don't get to dress that up as keeping the peace. He sighed heavily, and I imagined him sitting in that generic hotel room, tie discarded, hair rumpled, practicing contrition in the mirror. If you go public with this, it'll ruin us both. Please, think about our history, about what we've built. Something in me snapped then. For years, I'd twisted myself into knots to preserve what we built. But what had we really built? A marriage based on secrets, a family dynamic based on manipulation, a house filled with gaslight and shadows. I let the silence stretch until it hurt, then said very clearly, there's nothing left to ruin, Daniel. You already burned it down, and I hung up. The next morning, I marched into my attorney's office. Ms. Clark was a sharp woman in her early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She flipped through the binder slowly, page by page, her brows lifting higher with each piece of evidence. When she finally closed it, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. Anna, this is more than enough to pursue both criminal and civil charges. You have recordings, medical records, a clear pattern of intent. If we push this, Melissa and Daniel will be finished. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Not fear, but something closer to exhilaration. Finished. The word echoed in my head like a promise. What's our first step? I asked, my voice steady. She smiled thinly. We file for divorce, and we subpoena everything. Bank records, emails, call logs. If there's even a shred of additional evidence, we'll find it. Meanwhile, I'll contact the DA's office. With your binder, they'll take this seriously. I left her office lighter than I'd felt in months. For once, I wasn't just reacting to their cruelty. I was acting. Still, I knew Melissa wouldn't go down without a fight. Sure enough, 2 days later, she showed up at my doorstep, her designer heels clicking against the porch. She looked thinner, more brittle, her usual confidence cracked around the edges. Anna, she said, her voice urgent, we need to talk. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. There's nothing left to say. Her eyes darted nervously up and down the street. Look, I'll admit I made mistakes. But this doesn't have to go public. Think about the family. Think about your reputation. I laughed, loud and bitter. My reputation? Melissa, you tried to drug me. You lied to me for years. And now you're worried about appearances? Her mask slipped for a second, her face twisting into something sharper. If you take this to court, you'll drag all of us down. Are you ready for that kind of scrutiny? I leaned in, my voice low. Yes, because the difference between us is that I have nothing to hide. You do. She flinched, her composure cracking further. For the first time, I saw fear. Not just panic, but genuine fear. She turned sharply and walked away, her heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Subpoenas went out, investigators combed through records, the DA opened a formal inquiry. And through it all, I kept my head down at work, pouring myself into that client presentation they'd tried so desperately to sabotage. When the day came, I stood in front of the boardroom, my slides glowing on the screen, my voice steady and clear. Not only did I nail the presentation, but the client signed the contract on the spot, one of the biggest deals our firm had landed in years. As the applause echoed, I felt something deep inside me shift. This was what they had tried to steal from me, my competence, my confidence, my career, and they had failed. But the true turning point came when the investigators uncovered emails between Melissa and Daniel. They were damning. Messages where Melissa outlined her plan. She just needs to be too sick to make the pitch. Nothing lethal, just enough to take her out of commission. Daniel's replies were weak protests, followed by compliance. Fine, but this is the last time. When Miss Clark handed me the printed copies, my hands trembled as I read them. My recording had been strong, but this was ironclad. "We've got him," Miss Clark said simply. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, listening to the cicadas hum in the humid Charleston air. For the first time in years, I let myself imagine a future without their shadows looming over me. A future where I wasn't sick, paranoid, doubting myself. And as I stared into the night sky, I knew exactly how I wanted it to end. Not quietly, not with backroom settlements or hushed agreements. I wanted the truth to burn bright. I wanted everyone to see exactly what Daniel and Melissa had done, because only then would justice feel complete. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper, that mix of bureaucracy and history that clings to the walls of places where lives are decided. I sat at the long oak table beside Miss Clark, the binder laid open in front of me like armor. Every page of it felt like a weapon, every piece of evidence a bullet in a loaded chamber. Across from me, Daniel looked smaller than I remembered. His suit sagged slightly at the shoulders, his tie loose, his hair unkempt. Melissa sat beside him, her posture stiff, her jaw tight. Even in her designer dress, she looked brittle, like a porcelain doll one bump away from shattering. When the judge entered, the room hushed. My heart hammered, but I straightened my back, folded my hands, and reminded myself this wasn't about fear anymore. This was about truth. The prosecution went first, laying out the toxicology report, the suspicious timing of my hospital visits, and the recording. Melissa's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the presentation." Daniel's panicked reply followed. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup." The gallery murmured. Melissa's face went scarlet, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. Daniel hung his head, his hand rubbing the back of his neck, as though he could rub the words away. Then came the emails. Printed copies passed to the judge, projected on the screen for the courtroom to see. Melissa's instructions, Daniel's reluctant compliance. One line in particular drew gasps. "She's too perfect, too prepared. If she nails that pitch, I'll never get the account. We have to take her out." I forced myself to look straight ahead, my jaw clenched, but inside, every nerve in my body sang with vindication. Finally, everyone could see it. When it was my turn to testify, my legs trembled as I stood, but my voice was steady. I described the years of unexplained sickness, the humiliations, the gaslighting. I described the brunch, the bitter coffee, the switch. And then I said the words that had haunted me for years. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was weak, but I wasn't. I was being poisoned by the people who were supposed to love me. My voice cracked, but I didn't look away. In the gallery, I caught sight of Lena, sitting in the back row. Her eyes shone with tears, her chin lifted in pride. That gave me the strength to keep going. When the defense tried to spin it, their arguments were weak. It was just stress medication, Melissa's lawyer claimed. She exaggerated. There was no intent to harm. But the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was too clear, the pattern too undeniable. When closing arguments ended, the judge's voice rang out, firm and final. This court finds that the actions of Melissa and Daniel Watkins constitute conspiracy to cause bodily harm. Furthermore, the plaintiff's evidence of repeated incidents establishes a sustained pattern of misconduct. The court recommends criminal charges be pursued. My breath caught in my chest. Criminal charges. The words echoed like music. Melissa gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel slumped forward, his head in his hands. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, microphones shoved toward me, cameras flashing. Anna, do you feel vindicated? What do you want to say to Melissa and Daniel now? Do you think justice was served? I raised my chin, my voice clear. For years, I doubted myself. I thought I was paranoid, dramatic, weak. But today proved the truth. I wasn't crazy. I was surviving. And no one deserves to be made to feel like they're losing their mind when in reality, they're being betrayed. The clip aired that night on every local station. Colleagues texted me screenshots, friends sent messages of support. Strangers emailed me their own stories of betrayal. For once, the whispers weren't about me, they were about them. Melissa lost her job within the week. The firm couldn't afford the stain of scandal. The account she had tried to steal from me went forward under my name, our team celebrating late into the night with champagne and laughter. Daniel moved out of the hotel and into a tiny rental on the edge of town. His reputation shattered, his friends scarce. Every time he tried to reach out, I ignored him. My attorney filed for divorce, and the court sided with me on every count. His betrayal had cost him everything. His marriage, his reputation, his future. I thought seeing him crumble would make me feel triumphant. And it did, in a way. But mostly it felt quiet, peaceful, like setting down a weight I had carried for too long. The weeks that followed felt like waking up after a long fever. I slept through the night without nightmares. I walked into work without fearing whispers. I laughed with Lena over lunch, real laughter that bubbled up from a place I thought had died years ago. And one evening, sitting on my porch with a glass of wine, I realized something. The revenge hadn't been in watching Melissa pale in the courtroom or Daniel slouch in defeat. The revenge was in reclaiming myself, my voice, my health, my career, my peace. Because they hadn't just tried to poison me, they had tried to erase me, and I refused to be erased. Months later, the trial concluded, with Melissa accepting a plea deal. Probation, mandatory counseling, a ruined career. Daniel filed for bankruptcy after the divorce settlement left him with little more than his clothes and a used car. People sometimes ask me if I feel sorry for them. If, deep down, I wish I had handled it quietly, but I don't, not for a second, because silence is what they counted on. Silence is what gave them power, and I took that power back. And they know that they have something to do, and know that they have a personal love, and know that they don't have. That was the day I switched the cups. That was the day everything changed. When people hear my story, they always ask me the same thing. Anna, what kept you going? How did you find the strength to fight back? The truth is, I didn't feel strong most of the time. I felt broken, scared, and ashamed. I felt like maybe I was the crazy one, like maybe it was all in my head. And that's the cruelest part of betrayal. It doesn't just hurt your body, it eats away at your mind. But what I learned is this: even in the darkest moments, when you're curled up on the bathroom floor or staring at a cup of coffee that smells wrong, there's a voice inside you that knows the truth. I stopped ignoring that voice. I stopped letting them tell me who I was. And when I did, I took back everything they tried to steal: my health, my career, my sanity, my peace. So no, I don't regret fighting. I don't regret exposing them, because justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about proving to yourself that you were right all along. And to every woman listening who's ever been doubted, dismissed, or betrayed, you're not crazy. You're not weak. You are stronger than they think, stronger than you think. And one day, like me, you'll realize the best revenge is living free of the people who tried to break you. If my story hit home for you, hit that like button. It helps more people find it. Subscribe if you want more raw, real stories of betrayal and justice. And tell me in the comments, what's the moment you realized that taking back your power was the ultimate revenge?